Jochen Rindt of Austria. Despite its New York ownership, it's an Italian Ferrari, and when it crosses the finish, it makes the 6th year in a row that a Ferrari has won. An American victory in a French race with an Italian car.
The challenge to Ferrari came from Ford. The car was the GT40. Ferraris had not only been winning at Le Mans, they'd been winning regularly in America too. Henry Ford III was jealous of Italian success on his home ground. Ford were moving into racing to promote their image.
In the heady days of the 60s, it seemed a very good idea, and indeed it was, because it brought an enormous amount of excitement to the cars. And it opened doors into handling and ride and technical development and disc brakes and all sorts of things come along which might not otherwise have come.
Ford first tried to buy Ferrari. It wasn't just a matter of money. There was a clash of cultures, and the bid failed.
It was like trying to mix popcorn and pasta. I don't think it was a very nourishing recipe. And in the end, it was decided not to do it, but to go back and do the GT40 ourselves.
At Le Mans in 1966, GT40s came first, second and third. After spending $150 million, popcorn had triumphed over pasta.
We were doing 209 miles an hour down the Mulsanne Straight then. And even today, I mean, in the race, I don't think they do much over 230. The car itself, handling-wise, was, very, very, very good. It was a neutral handling car. Again, it was a car that you could get a bit of oversteer if you needed it. It was progressive and controllable. And altogether, just a very, very, very good car. It should have won at Le Mans long before it did.
GT40s won Le Mans 4 times in a row and repaid the investment. Then they too were eclipsed. The name which replaced Ford on the winner's rostrum at Le Mans was to become the most successful of them all, Porsche. This humble 356 was the first car to bear the family name. It came out in 1948. In the development of Porsche cars, racing has always been crucial. They took part in all the great sports car races, the Targa Florio, Daytona, Sebring. By 1970, they'd made 17 attempts to gain the greatest prize, an outright win at Le Mans. The 1970 Le Mans saw the beginning of a new era. Porsche's persistence was beginning to pay off. Their car that year was a much improved 917.
I think the Porsche 917 is just the most outrageous car. It's a wonderful tribute to them that drivers don't consider anything ever breaking. You just thunder down the Mulsanne Straight at 235, never think that anything's going to break. To me, that car had real personality.
The 917 was just the start of a string of successes in the 1970s. By 1982, they were dominant. The key was their reliability.
We got into the race, it ran absolutely faultlessly the whole race, didn't even have to lift the bodywork up to check in the back. And we won the race, and that was it.
Another 6 victories followed, an unrivaled record. The Porsche name had come a long way since its controversial beginning. Professor Ferry Porsche has spent his life designing, improving, and marketing his family of sports cars. He learned his engineering from his father.
From the age of 5, 6 years, I would go every Saturday, Sunday, weekends to the factory with my father and would listen to the conversations he had with his people.
His father, Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, designed the pre-war Auto Union's successful Grand Prix cars, which he called his locomotives. The hallmark of the early Porsche design, like the 1934 prototype NSU, was the engine at the back. This idea was developed by Ferdinand Porsche into what became the most successful car ever, the Volkswagen. The people's car was a triumph of concept, design and image. It was irresistible to Adolf Hitler, but after the war, the Porsche family suffered for their association with the Nazi war machine.
Die Franzosen wollten das Volkswagenwerk als Reparations...
The French wanted the Volkswagen factory as reparation payment and were negotiating this with the other allies. And they thought it would be best if they brought us in to set it up for them. And when the French car industry got wind of this, they found ways and means, so to speak, to have us locked up as war criminals.
Father and son spent time in prison, where Ferry Porsche planned how to restart the family business.
Was sollte ich Besseres tun als mein Hobby?
So what would be better for me to do than to translate my hobby into reality with my father's workforce? And it was done simply, you see, with such components as we had available. That meant, of course, many Volkswagen parts. To produce a very lightweight vehicle, which could be driven faster than the big locomotives, as I always say, and which was really fun to drive.
So ein Auto zu fahren.
Early Porsches were fun and they were fast. They quickly became the backbone of Ferry Porsche's strategy for selling his cars.
I had a very simple formula. A page of advertising costs a certain amount. And if I have a sporting success, then I get that page for nothing. And that page gets read.
For a company, the only thing worth investing in is winning. The price of winning today is the cost of beating established companies like Porsche, where the quest for technical improvement is constant and meticulous. Unlike the aesthetically pleasing cars of half a century ago, the shape of today's racing Porsche is no longer determined by fashion, but by function. That function is performance, 0 to 150 in 10 seconds, braking from 180 to 0 in 5 seconds. Achieving that performance is staggeringly expensive. It's a price any company serious about selling sports cars must pay. It has to buy its reputation and its image.
We can see with the Japanese, the massive investment they're putting in, whether it's in Formula One with Honda or Group C with Nissan, both in Europe and here, and Toyota. They're buying their heritage. The wins that Jaguar had at Le Mans in the 50s, it all stands you in good stead in the future. I mean, not to belabor the point, but I think the management that is prepared to back a successful racing program are the same aggressive management that is going to make a road car as good as it possibly can be.
Without the commercial link between racing and production cars, the hugely expensive business of racing would not survive.
20 years ago, I think there was a huge amount that went from race cars to production cars. 10 years ago, quite a bit went from race cars to production cars. Now, we're actually taking pieces from some of our production cars and adapting them to the race cars, and this is absolute true.
It's a very serious business. I mean, they wouldn't be in it unless it was linked directly to car sales. And the Japanese factories, the Jaguar factories, it's, I think, great racing. In fact, technically, there's more scope for innovation and new ideas than there is in the Indy cars or even Formula One.
As long as there's a market for glamorous cars, manufacturers will build them. And once they've built them, they'll always have to prove themselves by racing.